Hello, good to see you. Pastor Sam with a reflection for January 15th. Today is about growing something. Growing something. Now, my family and I was going to say my wife, but it's really my whole family and I have been increasingly growing our own food. And so this is an invitation for you to grow something. I know that quite a few of you are home gardeners already, and that's wonderful. Consider growing some new, extra weird thing. New, comma, extra, comma, weird thing. Not an extra weird thing, although you could grow an extra weird thing. Increase your repertoire of fruits and vegetables. Grow something odd. There's some unfamiliar native plants. My wife has been getting deep into this, and she's got quite a few things that she wants to try. So we're going to be expanding our inventory of fruits and vegetables this spring. I'm especially excited for and continuing to do that. But the idea of growing something, and so I want to kind of share with you how we came to be gardeners, why we are gardening, in the hopes that I can perhaps inspire you to give it a try if you're not, and if you are, to hopefully encourage you to continue gardening and to maybe branch out in some weird stuff. Now, I would have to say that, again, this is thinking theologically, and it should not be a huge surprise that the reason for my gardening is at its heart theological. And I know that's kind of a weird thing to say, but just bear with me because we'll get there. Way back at the very beginning of things, in Genesis chapter 2, Adam's profession was a gardener. Adam was a gardener. Genesis 2, 5 through 9, when no bush of the field had yet sprung up, and it had not yet rained, but there was a mist coming up to water the ground. The Lord God formed the man from dust in the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. And the Lord planted a garden in the east, in Eden, and there he put the man that he had formed to work the ground and serve it. Adam was a gardener. Gardener is the world's oldest profession, contrary to some other opinions. Being a gardener. Now, interestingly, gardening existed before the fall into sin. So just let that sink in for a moment. Gardening is the purest profession. Farming is the purest profession on the face of the earth, right? Do not let my upbeat tone do any violence against. I am not at all. I very seriously say that gardening is the purest profession on the face of the earth. Grow some plants, right? All right. Now, God creates man for a variety of reasons, which I won't exactly get into. But one of them that he explicitly says is to serve the ground, and broadly, to serve God's creation. God creates man to be a steward, get into that a little bit, steward of his creation. Adam, and then Eve, a short while later, exist to care for God's garden, to tend it, to keep it, to really cause it to thrive, to keep it in a thriving condition. Now remember, there were no weeds back then. Thorns and thistles are a result of the fall into sin. So this was only a pleasurable activity, right? Imagine gardening with no weeds. What a joy that would be. Exactly. That's the point. Anyway, the people, Adam and Eve specifically, but people broadly, are still today stewards of God's creation. When we hear that word, we think about our wallet, which is actually a very narrow reading, understanding of that word, that broadly, our lives are caring for God's creation. Any of the things that God has given to you, for the family that God gives to you, for the land that God gives to you, for the talents and abilities and interests that God gives to you. Broadly, your entire life is using all of the stuff that God gives you to care for God's creation, and God directs us out towards other people, so to then care for, serve, love those other people. Now, it might seem like I've gotten away from gardening, but at its core, gardening is caring for the land that you have. Now, if you are in an apartment and you don't have a backyard, garden in a little pot. Like, buy a little pot, stick a tomato plant in there, water that thing, not too often. There's plenty of ink spilled on how to care for plants, so I'm not going to get into these things. But I want to encourage you, regardless of your situation, regardless of where you live, your ability to get out and weed, find a nice solution to be able to grow something. If that means growing something indoors, they've got these like indoor light grow kits, right? Where you can put something on your counter and grow lettuce and have fresh lettuce to eat every, I don't know, a couple of weeks or so, right? To grow something. Now, this also, first of all, to be stewards of God's creation, caring for the things that God gives us. But gardening also helps to direct you away from yourself and outside of yourself. Instead of being preoccupied with you have another living thing to take care of, a plant, right? Which you have to water on a somewhat regimented basis, that you have to prune, again, on a somewhat regimented basis. If it's outside, you have to weed it, you have to harvest it, and then do something with, right? There's these things to care for another living thing. Now, the price of failure is pretty low. I mean, if you buy a tomato plant in a pot, you're looking at, I don't know, maybe $10 if you buy really extravagant. Like, the price of failure is pretty low. But it's the opportunity to look outside of yourself and to have this other living, to care for God's creation, to take part in being a steward and raising a living thing. Where, again, failing to raise a human being has a much, much higher cost than failing to raise a tomato plant. So it's a good, I don't want to say gardening is a replacement for children, but they are both directed outside of yourself. Here you have another living thing to take care of and to show gratitude to God for the blessings he gives, and to try to, I keep saying the same thing over and over. It's kind of the basic reason to care for God's world, to care for his earth. Still kind of in this theological vein, and then we're going to switch gears and talk about kind of a more practical one. But is this idea of being a creator versus a consumer. And this is going to segue nicely into the next one. The vast majority of people are consumers. And what I mean by that is that they don't actually make anything. They go out and buy whatever they need, and they consume goods that others have made. Now, this is not an inherently wrong or evil thing. Don't hear me saying that. I would say that it is most typically, how do I want to phrase this? I want to phrase it gently but sternly. That only consuming is a poorer choice. I think that's the best way to say it. Versus, here's kind of the counter. The counter to being a consumer is being a creator. Now again, don't hear me say the word creator in the sense of Genesis 1:1, God created the heavens and the earth, right? When we create things, we are really transforming. That's the sense of it. You're taking a seed and you're sticking it in the dirt that already exists, and the seed is really doing the work, but you're transforming one thing that God has made into another thing that God has made. So you're not making new stuff out of nothing. Only God does that. But you are creating in the sense that you're causing new things to be. You're kind of transforming the raw materials. So think about a carpenter who takes a big pile of wood and turns it into a chair or a table or a bunch of cabinets, right? No one would say that now you would say the carpenter has made the cabinets. And no one understands that as he just waved his magic saw and poof, there were cabinets. You understand that to mean the carpenter bought some raw materials and through the process of carpentry made cabinets. When you are gardening, you are not creating new plants or new life. You are instead transforming the tiny seeds into things that you can eat, which in turn will create more seeds that you can then plant later and will grow into more. Like, this is the cure of world hunger, guys. Anyway, being a creator means contributing, making for yourself, also for your family, right? We garden to feed our family. Versus being a consumer tends to be a very inwardly focused thing. You are worried about how other people can satisfy your needs, which is not inherently wrong, but is most typically a poorer choice when you are able to be a creator. Okay, I'm trying to walk kind of a fine line here. So if you are able to garden, which is to say that you can move, then try to do it, right? Grow something. Be a creator. Take care of God's creation. Flipped over to the back side of my note card. Okay. Now, theological stuff is very important, but sort of done with that. The next kind of few things I'm going to mention are more practical reasons for gardening. Tomatoes being the best example. Tomatoes are grown. The tomato varieties in the grocery store are selected, grown, picked, and transported for one characteristic and only one characteristic: their ability to be transported. Tomato growers don't care how those tomatoes taste. If they taste like garbage, no one's going to buy them. But tomatoes don't taste like garbage, right? Even grocery store tomatoes at least taste like tomatoes. But there are not a variety of colors. There are not a variety of types. Tomatoes are selected for one thing: to be able to be put in a bucket or box or whatever and driven thousands of miles to your grocery store. They are not selected primarily for taste or appearance or any of that stuff. They need to hold up in transit. You are buying vegetables that have not been grown for delicious flavors or nutritional value. You are buying vegetables that have been grown to be able to get where they need to go. That's just what it is, right? If you have no problem with that, and a lot of people have no problem with that, that's fine. Buy vegetables in the grocery. This is not boycotting the grocery store by any means. This is, again, helping you to think through the choices that you make and to either confirm them, to say, yes, that is what I want to do. I'm going to keep doing that. Or if you see a better option, to say, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try something new. I'm going to grow a weird variety of food and just see how it turns out. The next one, I probably wouldn't have made such a big point of, but given all of the shortages of food that we've seen over the past year, and I believe will continue seeing, is this idea of self-sufficiency, really. For another example, we have not been able to buy, now this is a very specific example, but it helps to highlight the point. We have not been able to buy the store brand pepperoni in like a year, right? It's just not, when it gets there, there's either so little of it that someone else buys it before us, or it's not there at all, and no one is able to buy it. Now, again, this is a very specific, targeted example, and nothing against the manufacturers of that store brand, right? Don't hear me saying anything negative about them. It's kind of this whole cascading effect where, if you remember last spring, I think it was almost a year ago, earlier, last year's spring, the hog ranchers were giving away their hog because none of the packing plants were able to buy them and to manufacture them. And now we're starting to see the intricacy of our food production system. And when one little part is missing, that it sort of causes problems for a long while. And so I present this idea of growing something as a way to reduce your dependence on especially things that you don't control, right? Whether packing plants are able to have employees and to work and to transport their goods all over the place. You have absolutely no control over that. Well, maybe you do. But the rest of you, certainly, I have no control over vegetable growers, packing plants, any of that. I am absolutely at the mercy. Store brand pepperoni, haven't bought it in about a year, right? Just would love to, have tried to, but can't. My family and I are dependent on this supply chain, this production chain to give us the thing that we need. Now, pepperoni is a little bit harder to grow than a tomato, but you start somewhere and slowly work up. So the growing things helps you to, again, reduce your consuming, your dependence on others, and instead be able to provide for yourself. Imagine, what was it that we made? I think it was last summer we had a BLT, right? Tomatoes are like right on the front of my brain today. With tomatoes that we grew in our backyard, lettuce that we grew in our backyard, bread that my wife made, and pigs that we bought, shout out to Mark Rilling, pigs that we bought from Mark Rilling that were butchered in Oneida. The longest distance that our food came was probably the flour for the bread, but my wife turned that flour into bread in our own house. The pigs were transported, I don't know, how far is Oneida? 30 miles? 30 miles and back? Like, our food was all grown in Pierre, flour aside, but it's North Dakota flour, so that's okay. Yeah, and what a joy, and dare I say pride, that my wife and I felt in providing this meal for our family of stuff where we knew that it was good, we knew where it came from, and we were able to make this meal, this whole meal, out of stuff that we knew where it came from. It's a wonderful feeling. Again, I'm not a big feelings guy, but on this one, it's definitely part of it. This joy in being able to contribute to eating the stuff that you eat and raising it and being there to see that chocolate milk doesn't come from brown cows. I know, a surprise, right? To know how your food is made and to be able to choose. You know what? I really like this variety of tomatoes because I want to make salsa with it. Or you know what? I love to go out there and grab one and just eat it like an apple. I'm going to get some that are really good for fresh eating. Or, you know what? I want to be able to freeze mine, so I'm going to get some tomatoes that are great. There's tons of varieties of all kinds of vegetables, especially, that you can select. Some that grow sooner, some that, I mean, it's nutso, right? All kinds of different vegetables. I encourage you to grow something. The reason I'm putting this video out in the middle of January, I realize it's a little early to go outside and dig in the ground. Although recent days aside, it feels pretty nice. But one of the reasons I present it is that our go-to seed people that we buy seeds from are having like a huge backlog of orders, right? They're back ordered on quite a few things. They're out of a lot of things. And so I'm telling you to grow something in the middle of January, to go and look for seeds now. Because I feel that there's going to be quite a few new gardeners, especially this year. And if you are interested in doing this, to get on it and to buy some stuff today, right now. Stop my video, go check out a seed company and buy some seeds, buy something, buy a tomato plant, right? I have a feeling this summer is going to be hot and dry, perfect weather for tomatoes. If I'm wrong about that, that's fine. You can blame me for your tomatoes failing. I can handle that, right? Growing fresh tomatoes, it's a wonderful thing. But grow something. Grow something. Pick one or two things if you've never gardened before. Go out back, dig a hole in the ground, throw them in there. The price of failure is very, very low, right? If you are already a gardener, try something new. Try some weird stuff, some weird native plants. And again, shout out to my wife. She's got plenty of weird native plants in mind. So if you're curious, talk to her sometime. Anyway, that's it. Grow something. I'll see you next time. God's peace be with you.